When the sun hits the eye like a big pizza bite, that's Omori. Hello! Over the last few weeks, I have finished my first playthrough of the game Omori, and I also have a notion of how the other endings are. Also managed to get exactly 50% of all the achievements on my first playthrough, and I think that's pretty impressive. But the game has left me pain, agony even, dread, if you may. I have 1,000 things I want to talk about it in regards of it. I was really in doubt of what I should make this video about. Omori is truly one of the most interesting games I've played in a while, and it's also one where there's an insane amount of things that are worth discussing and analyzing. But I decided I should start with something relatively simple and yet that captures a lot of why this game is so good, which is the character or creature design of the antagonistic presence in the game, the thing referred to as something. And I'm gonna do it while eating basil leaves. Basil leaves. This is good. You think it's not good to just take like a plant out of like the plant and eat it? But that's actually nice. I like basil. Both the character and the plant. And I also have like a single piece of tofu. My original idea was to just eat tofu through the game because of the gag with the sprout moles and the tofu, but just such a small piece. Please be warned that this video will not only be spoiling some incredibly important parts of the plot of Omori, I think most of the plot, like 90% of the plot, as I will also be tackling some incredibly sensitive subjects. And as much as I love the game, I also need to admit it's one of the most upsetting and triggering stories I've seen in a while. The main content warnings for this video is going to be trauma, mentions of death and murder, mentions of suicide, delusion, upsetting imagery, and depression. Omori is described by its summary as a surreal psychological horror game, and while its narrative isn't completely fixated on the scary aspect all the time, it's definitely a terrifying game. The experience of playing Omori is very similar to the experience of watching those trauma core videos. You know those weird ass webcore videos that are like, ooh, trauma. That's basically what Omori is, which is kind of interesting to see how people see trauma in a way, but that's theme for another video. In Omori, you follow a teenage boy who can access a fantastical world in his mind. In that world, he controls a sort of avatar named Omori, who goes on adventures with fantasy caricatures of his own in real life friends, in an environment where everything is good. But as you see the world through Omori, it becomes clear that something is wrong, that there is a darkness lurking beneath everything, a darkness that is creeping in and calling for the boy, whose real name is Sunny, to wake up. During the game, which really early makes it clear that it's about trauma, and that Sunny is repressing some memory, you as the player is haunted by an entity. While it's presented as many things through the game, it is normally shown as a consistent symbol that is the core of everything that is going on. The entity's name is Something. It is said to be Something. Something has probably one of the best horror designs I have seen in my entire life. It's so impressive and effective that it's kind of hard to even start talking about it. That doesn't mean it's easy to make something scary, but similarly to comedy, the things that do scare you are simple, and your job is to use terrifying formulas in ways that are the most effective and different from each other. The most famous and common rule of fear, one you've probably heard once or twice, is the rule of fearing the unknown. Movies where you spend the entire runtime without ever seeing the monster that haunts the protagonist. Books that describe unimaginable horrors that you can't possibly perceive, secrets and cults, deaths left open to interpretation. The lack of explanation is a key aspect to what horror is. This is why most horrors are mysteries, and some without ever having a conclusion, as it's normally understood that no matter what the author puts on screen, it will never be as scary as whatever the audience expected it to be. And the second horror principle that is relevant for this video today relies on the way a story is narrated. The best way to try to make someone feel scared is to make them feel threatened. And in order for them to feel that way, they need to see themselves in the characters leaving the threat. Some producers misjudge that and instead just create bland stand-ins for bland personalities that are only there so the audience can project. But that never works. In fact, in general, it has the opposite effect. This is why there is the joke that horror protagonists are bland and dumb. It's an attempt to create a blank slate for the viewer. Again, that choice is unfortunate to say the least, because the best way to make the audience project into someone is by making a character that you can point and go, this can be a person. And in order to do that, you just gotta make the person human and have human thoughts and human flaws and human fears. After that, the projection from the public comes naturally. Just look at Kimmy's. Omori is a horror story that takes these two horror elements and uses it to its full advantage in a way where the narrative presented is one of the most effective I've seen in a long time, with the purpose to implant a deep sense of distress in the player. The game does this by making you, the player, experience the events of the game exclusively through Sunny's, the protagonist's, recollection of the events. It's established since the very beginning of the game that something happened in Sunny's life, something so awful and distressing that basically tore his life and his friends apart and left him with a deep-rooted trauma. Due to that trauma, he stays in a state of delusion where he is constantly living through his imagination in a dream world where things are still fine, and he himself has forgotten what actually happened. You start the game in the dream world. You meet his friends not by actually knowing them, but by seeing Sunny's fake caricatures of them. You explore that world as Omori and becomes attached to it, just to receive a bucket of cold water as the first real life segment starts. And you realize how grim things truly are. You find out his sister, Mori, is dead. You find out all his friends have drifted apart and have moved on with their lives. You find out he is a shut-in, hikikomori, which is where the name of the game comes from, Omori. And you also realize that this is probably Sunny's realization every day. Because since he's so deeply delusional and traumatized, having that shock as the player is experience what Sunny probably feels every day as he wakes up. And that applies to all moments in the game. As he reconnects with his in real life friends and gets closer to the truth, so does the player. And as you go through and you fall in love with his friendship and with the characters and with the world, and you find more about them and more about their lives and wish good things for them, you wonder what happened. You truly want these characters to be happy and to be together and things to be fine. But before I dive deeper how the game turns that whole thing and uses that connection that you have with the character to scare you, let's go back to Something for a moment. Something looks somewhat like a generic ghost, all black with a single eye in the middle. The figure appears in various parts of the game in a rather ominous form, which makes it rather versatile, as there's multiple variations of Something throughout the game. All of them share the entirely black body with one or more eyes. Through a design standpoint, if we unite the simplicity and the rule of the unknown, it becomes an extremely effective design. Something is a silhouette, so you wonder what it truly is. You wonder why it doesn't seem to leave you alone and why it keeps haunting you. It's a placeholder for fear, for that thing in the back of your head that calls to you. You don't know what it is or why it truly scares you, but it's there and you can't help but feel uneasy when you look at it. You see its darkness creep in throughout the game, even when you're having fun with your friends in the dream world, or even after a nice day in the real world. And in the Hikikomori route, where you ignore your friends in real life, trying to reconnect and continue to be a shut-in, something is always present on the real life segments as a stagnant sprite that follows you into every room. It doesn't do anything to you, but it's there. It's the reminder that things aren't okay, even if you try to ignore that fact. And in the dream world, Sunny's perception of his old best friend, Basil, is what keeps bringing him closer to something and to the darkness. And that's a theme throughout the game, that getting closer to his friends in the real life is correlated to having to face the truth. And Basil as himself is a reminder of what the truth is. And that's why he is missing throughout most of the game. And you, as Omori and his friends, have to find him. It's actually kind of funny because I started playing the game convinced that someone had died. And I was right, someone did die, but I expected it to be Basil and not Mari. So when I got to the real world segments, my reaction was like, yo, Basil isn't dead. Wait, Mari is dead. And as the search for Dream Basil slowly leads you to Brazil, aka Trauma Land, you also slowly accept the real world and its people, even though it feels empty, because you as the player meet Mori in the dream world, and she's a great character, and her relationship with Sunny was great, and everything is sad in the real world because she died, and you wonder what created this. What was the thing that led all of these things, bad things, to happen? It's said to you that Mari's death was a suicide. You see how it affected you and your friends, but something seems wrong. Why is real world Basil traumatized? Seem to know more about what happened, and why does it seem like a piece is missing? What is something? Why is something there? Why it keeps following you? And then, by your own choice, if you keep going after the truth, if you keep going after your friends, if you keep going after Basil, after confronting your trauma, after finding your friends again, you see it. Sunny killed Mori by accident. Basil, in desperation, afraid that the person he holds in the highest regard is going to be punished, he forges a suicide. And something is the silhouette of Mori's hanged body. After seeing how it happened, why it happened, which was an argument between Sunny and Mori about their duet that they planned to go do together because Sunny wanted to spend more time with his sister, and seeing how he pushed her down the stairs in a fit of rage, which he immediately regretted it, knowing that it was something that could so easily be avoided. And you wish you didn't know the truth, because by that point, you already relate to those characters. You relate to his friends. You relate maybe to Mori, maybe to Sunny. Maybe you also have a trauma. Maybe you also want to see people happy, and you see what caused it, and you wish you didn't. That is what Omori does. Omori subverts what horror normally does, which is to make you imagine what gives you fear, but it presents a situation where what you imagined is actually better than it actually is, because what happened is so awful, and most importantly so realistic, because it's literally an accent with characters that you already relate like your real friends, and you imagine what would happen if you were in his place. And that is terrifying, and you understand why Sunny doesn't want to remember of it. You understand him. And when he has the choice to confront that and to go into the real world and cry, and every single other confrontation that happens after this, it's much less scary and much more sad. It's freeing almost. because there's nothing else to hide, there's nothing else to scare, it's just pure sadness and it's there. And that's what something is. The design of something, which represents something so awful, is a memory. It's a reminder. You don't know what it is, but it's there. It's your trauma and it keeps haunting you. And everyone has a something. Everyone has a trauma that keeps following you everywhere. And in order to move on, you need to look at it and you need to confront it. But most importantly, that's the part that I find most interesting. In order to win the game and get the good ending, you don't fight something because something's the reminder. You need to accept that happened in order to move on. Sunny fights himself, Omori, which is his dream world that wants to pretend it didn't happen, that wants to repress something, that wants to keep seeing it as just a silhouette and not as the fact. And after he confronts Omori, and after he confronts his thoughts, which is in one of the most powerful moments of the game, probably the most powerful, which is him saying, you loved her and you killed her, and all of that thing, that all of his friends loved her and you killed her. And you see all that self-hate and all the desire to isolate himself from the world. He needs to fight that in order to get rid of his ghost. He needs to understand there's still good things in the world. There's still that in order to not make his friends suffer more, in order to be able to create new memories, in order to save Basil, who is also traumatized by the situation because they were too young to comprehend any of this. He needs to move on. He needs to be there. He needs to understand what happened. He needs to face the truth. And that's why something is terrifying. Something is that thing that we don't want to confront because it will hurt us, but it will also allow us to move on. It will allow us to not hurt the people we love any longer. It will allow us to seek forgiveness. It's fear. It's a fear that hold us down. That's why something is so genius to me. That was the video. It's much darker than what I normally do, but I thought it was interesting to talk about it. Maybe I'll make more and more videos. There's a lot to talk about it. So tell me if y'all want me to hear more about that. I'm already planning the next video, and yeah, goodbye. Please subscribe. I'm also posting Omori drawings in my Twitter, in my Instagram. I'm doing commissions. Please commission me. Please commission me, please. Please commission me. Until the next video.